Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. So last time we discussed the first of the challenges in the dua from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which says, "A'udhu billahi min al-ham wa min al-hazan." So yes, last time we talked about ham, which is worry about the future, and now we're going to talk about hazan and the solution to hazan. So hazan refers to sadness, regret, grief over something that has happened in the past. So similarly to last time where we discussed that the solution to hazan or to hem was sabr, was being patient. Sabr definitely plays a role, I think, in dealing with hazan and sadnesses and things that happened in the past. But in addition to that is the virtue of tawakkul. So we're going to talk about tawakkul. We're going to first start out by looking at some examples. Actually, no, before that you wanted to do an exercise, right?
Yeah, but I don't know how effective that it will be on here.
Yeah, will we be able to get response from them, or?
Yes. And some people, as they come in, they can talk and you can hear them.
Okay. Yeah. If anyone has any comment or wants to raise their hand or virtually raise your hand, ask a question, then please do. Just go ahead and say something.
Yeah, I don't know how it works, but maybe we can get
answers. Just imagine that there's an audience here. Yeah. And what you would do?
Okay. So the exercise we did last week was very impactful. And the reason I like starting off with an exercise is that you actually start thinking and your brain works. So today's question is, think about 2 people that you love and trust and tell us why.
So we'll take like a minute to think about that for a second.
Okay.
People that you?
2 people or 1 that you love and that you trust, and why.
Mm-hmm. So I think we can go ahead. Yeah. Not to be cheesy, but I do love and trust you. And I think the key things that I noticed as to the why do I trust you, is because I observe honesty and sort of whenever, for smaller thing, or like for whenever there's like a point of moral decision, you have an opinion, even if it's like a small thing, like should I say this or not say this, there's like a clear right and wrong answer with you. And so I'm like, okay, so I trust that you're going to tell me whenever those opinions or whenever those lines shouldn't be crossed, or like, your belief, basically, your opinions.
I'm not going to be cheesy and say the same thing, so I'm going to say my father, because he's always been there. What else can I say? Someone I can trust, whose opinions that I know, whose opinions I can depend upon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, with parents in general.
Yeah. So I'll bring that back.
Any answers from anyone else? Person that you love or trust, and what about them makes you love or trust them? Have any answer? Well, we will go ahead and give the explanation about what did the exercise mean.
Should I do that now? Yeah. Okay. So the reason, actually no, I'm gonna wait on that.
You want to wait?
Because it really connects to tawakkul.
Okay, so there will be a reason for why we did that exercise, which will come up later, and I'll continue, inshallah. Right? Bismillah. So on the subject of hazan, the first thing I'd like to do, inshallah, is to recite an ayah of Quran. Please forgive any mistakes in recitation. Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلا تنصروه فقد نصر الله إذ أخرجه الذين كفروا ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار إذ يقول لصاحبه لا تحزن إن الله معنا فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لهم تروها وجعل كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى وكلمة الله هي العليا والله عزيز حكيم. If you do not aid the Prophet, Allah has already aided him when those who disbelieved had driven him out as one of two when they were in the cave, and he said to his companion, "Do not grieve, indeed Allah is with us." And Allah sent down his tranquility upon him and supported him with angels you did not see, and made the word of those who disbelieved the lowest, while the word of Allah, that is the highest. And Allah is exalted in might and wise. And so the part of that verse that I want us to remember, just as inshallah by the end of this class we will have this dua memorized so we can use it whenever we want. This dua, right, it says, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazn, and it continues. It's asking for protection from these things, but it's sort of providing the problem. You're worried about all these bad things and you're asking for Allah's protection. This verse can act as a good, or part of this verse can act as a good thing to repeat, to remember the answer to those problems, which of course is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in specifically the section that says, La tahzan, inna Allaha ma'ana. So whenever you're faced with hazan, if you remember this little section, La tahzan, inna Allaha ma'ana, La tahzan, inna Allaha ma'ana. That is so helpful because it directly connects sadness and worry about the past to the solution, which is specifically the ma'iyya, the being with of Allah. So when it doesn't just say La tahzan, inna Allaha al-ilahu al-wahid, or it's not just that indeed Allah is one or something like that, but it's specifically that Allah is with us. And what that means is that he is present with us. He is closer than our jugular vein, as the ayah says. And so this is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Abu Bakr when they were in the cave and they were fleeing from Mecca to Medina. And so I think it's really important to remember that the connecting to being with Allah is the protection from sadness. And I wanted to share before Ayantu gets into the details of how to deal with the problem of hazan from a more theory basis, just to look at it as to what did the companions of the Prophet experience from his character and his actions when he showed them in situations of his own hazan and the situations of their hazan, of their sadness. So I think many of us are familiar with some of the examples of the Prophet's own life and how he had a life that was filled with challenges, struggle, and moments of sadness. And so one example, which I think again shows the connection to Allah, that he turned to Allah whenever he was in a state of sadness, was the story of Taif. And paraphrasing the story quickly, essentially he went to Taif seeking help from the people there. He wanted to do da'wah to them, to call them to Allah, and they completely rejected him. They sent their children in the streets to throw stones at him and those who were coming with him to help. And so he left the city bleeding, bruised, humiliated. His soles were cut up so much from from stones. They say that his sandals were soaked with blood, and he kind of, at one point, he bent down in far from the city when he had left, and he prayed, essentially saying, "Oh Allah, if you are not displeased with me, then I am content with everything that you have commanded from me, but just don't be displeased with me." And so later it came that the angel Jibril came to him and said, I can destroy these people for you. And he said, no, I wouldn't want those people to be destroyed. Maybe from them will come believers. But the key part I wanted to focus on was the idea that all of the worldly calamities he didn't see as anything but Allah's manifestation. So if it was a sign of Allah's testing him, then he was happy. But if it was a sign of Allah's displeasure, then he asked for protection from Allah from that. But that personal one-on-one talking directly to Allah and saying, as long as you are content with me, then I can go through with this, and to establish that connection in order to overcome the challenges, I think is very powerful. And you see that in other instances when his wife Khadija passed away and Abu Talib passed away, and there's a lot to talk about there, which I think a lot of scholars have done good justice. But I also wanted to pick out a few examples of the Prophet dealing with the sadness of other people. Like when he looked around and someone came to him with sadness, what was his reaction to them, and as a teaching for how they should react to their sadness. So this is from the Shama'il of Imam Nabhani, a collection of the characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One really interesting example I found was this concept of a kunya. So a kunya is like a name that you give, like a nickname you give in the Arab culture. Abu so-and-so, but they don't actually have a kid named so-and-so. And I found this very interesting specific detail about how the Prophet ﷺ would give, it says here, he would confer an agnomen on, in order to win their heart's affection, he would confer it on the one who did not have one and would address him by it. So if someone wasn't cool enough, if you think about it, like people these days have nicknames and someone is like, I'm not cool enough to have a nickname. The Prophet ﷺ would know who those people are and he would give them a nickname. And this would be out of sweetness. And it even mentions, so this is the interesting detail, he would also confer agnomens upon women, kunya upon women, both those with children and those without, starting with the latter. So there would have been an idea that in that society, especially, with the value of children and inheritance going forward, those without children would be in a state of sadness about this. And he would call a lot of his companions, female Sahaba, by a term of so-and-so, a name that he himself gave, specifically starting with those who didn't have children, out of a desire to, from what I would understand, is to ease their sadness, because now they have their so-and-so, even if it's not something real, like a physical child, it's something that the Prophet gave them. So it's, it's a very powerful thing, or it's as real to them because of their connection with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And lastly, out of this book, I just wanted to mention another kunya that the Prophet gave was to a little child. So as a child, he couldn't obviously have any children yet, but he gave this little child the nickname of Abu Umayr. And the story narrated by Tirmidhi is that this child, this son of a Sahabi, young boy, this Sahaba, he said to the boy, "Ya Abu Umayr, what did the Nughair do?" And so there's a rhyming there, and the Nughair referred to a pet bird that he had, and that bird passed away, which made him very sad. And so by naming the boy Abu Umayr, which rhymed with Nughair, he kind of gave the boy something to sort of console himself over or get over the loss of the bird. But now he has someone more, paying even more attention to him, who is the Prophet ﷺ. So when you lose someone, I think there's the prophetic idea of, when someone loses someone important to them, you don't distance yourself from them and say, oh, I don't want to, get myself involved, but rather you go there, you get involved, you start being friendly. And also there's another aspect of the fact that he asked him, what did the bird do, can allow the boy at a young age to sort of reminisce. Like he can say, oh, the bird used to follow me here and used to follow me there, and he used to, tweet like this, or he used to make all these sounds. And so by doing that, the boy can talk about it and get over what he went through. So I think that those are two powerful things. And there's another short story that I'd like to share, but first I'd like to take a break. If anyone has any comments, if you have any comments, if Oda, you have any comments about these stories.
I think the fact that he went out of his way to make someone else feel better when they're feeling low, like that kind of mercy to mankind is displayed in his characteristics or from the stories that you told us at least.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we struggle with, because we have our own moments of sadness, so we think that like we're always focused on what we have. But that would probably also help get away from
Who's capturing you?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. So I think that's true, and it's definitely not easy, because I think we have a lot of things in our life that can make us feel lost. And, if anyone has any examples, please share any thoughts you have on hazn, on sadness, and how you dealt with it, and tawakkul, which we'll get to it. Lastly, I just wanted to share before we switch to Ayantu's section, which will be about how to deal with all of these in a more theoretical way. Like we talked about these examples of the Prophet, we talked about another story that I'm going to share. How do we turn looking at these into like a process that we can do, inshallah. So the last story I wanted to share is actually from the poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi, who is well-known, famous figure of Islamic poetry. He's very famous these days in the West for his spirituality, his understanding of deep things. But I think people forget that he was also a scholar of Hanafi fiqh. Like he was a very mainstream Orthodox Muslim figure, and you can see that in the way that he discusses the praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That a lot of his poetry, which unfortunately is not the poetry that gets translated as much or focused by the West, is a lot of his poetry focuses on, or they'll translate it, but then they'll remove some of the more Islamic parts of what he's saying. But one thing that he talks about a lot is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He talks about his attributes. He talks about his behavior, and this specific story of poetry relates to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam showing rahmah towards someone who was, or towards something experiencing hazn, not even a person, but a thing. And so this is about the pillar, one of the palm trees that sort of stood up the masjid in Medina, and how it, in the narration, it experienced sadness. So this is the groaning pillar by Rumi. The call of "Am I not your Lord" continues to come from him every moment, and essential and outward qualities of things are becoming existent. And this word "am I not" refers to "Alastu bi rabbikum," which is in the Quran, where Allah says, "Am I not your Lord?" Although the reply of "but of course," Bala, isn't coming from them, but their arrival into physical existence itself is the reply of Bala. Listen to a story without delay concerning what I have said in explanation about the awareness of wood and stone. Concerning the lamentation of the groaning pillar when they constructed a pulpit for the Prophet, may God pour blessings and peace upon him. Because the congregation had become large and they said, "We can't see your blessed face at the time of your preaching." And about the hearing of that pillar's complaint by the Prophet and his companions, and the clear question and answers exchanged by Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, with the pillar. The groaning pillar was lamenting about its separation from the Prophet like someone possessed of intelligence. The Prophet said, "What do you desire, O pillar?" It said, "My soul has become like a wound full of blood because of separation from you. I was your support, but you rushed away from me and made a place to lean against on top of the pulpit." The Prophet said, "Do you wish to be made into a palm tree so that anyone from the east or the west may pick fruit from you? Or do you wish that Allah may make you a lofty cypress tree in the world to come so that you will remain fresh and new for eternity?" It said, "I wish for that which became enduring because of its permanence. O unaware one, listen. Don't be less than a piece of wood." The Prophet buried the pillar in the ground so that it may become resurrected like mankind on the day of judgment, so that you may know that everyone whom Allah has called and chosen for himself remains inactive from the labor of this world. Since anyone whose work and burden is from Allah has found entry into that place in the hereafter and goes beyond the need for worldly work. But as for the one who has received no gift concerning divine secrets, he will never confirm as true the crying of inanimate things. And so essentially what Rumi is saying is, people don't go around saying, Bala, of course, Allah is my Lord. They don't necessarily have that understanding that they did back when Allah pulled our souls from the back of Adam alayhi salam, as the Quran mentions. We don't have that understanding. We don't see Allah as our Lord anymore. But this tree, in its moment of sadness for being separated from the Prophet ﷺ, was able to understand that. And the Prophet addressed his sadness by basically saying, you're sad for not being close to me physically in this world, but I can pray to Allah that you will be in the gardens of Jannah with me in the Akhirah. So this is something that comes from a hadith that happened during the time of the Prophet, but it also is a reminder to us, I think, don't be less than that piece of wood that miraculously broke and started making a moaning sound, and all the companions heard it just because it was separate from the Prophet. So not only should we try to heal ourselves from sadness at some things, but also sadness can be a tool that we use to long for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to do good, but not an excessive sadness, one that we know that Allah will take care of for us in the akhirah, inshallah. So akhir da'wana, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sallam. Yeah, I know I kind of went fast, so please forgive me, but I really wanted to cover these stories because I was really excited about them. Any thoughts that anyone has before we move to the process?
Yeah. Let me check everything, the logistics and everything. Let's see.
You got on camera with it too. Did you have any thoughts about the poem? I really like that.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last time about
Yeah. We get uluhiyya, but we don't get uluhiyya.
So does anyone have any questions or comments that you would like to give regarding what was given?
Well, if you're there.
Any questions? Let's look in the question section. Okay, no questions. Okay. So we'll continue in about 30 seconds with the second portion. Can everyone hear? Okay.
Shut up.
Can everyone hear me? Are there any questions? Okay, continue.
So
Is it in real?
A little down. Yeah.
Is it good?
So Tal,
Yeah.
technology. So Talib referred to regret and problems and different ways. We thought about like, what's the solution to regret? How do you ultimately solve it? And the conclusion we came to, or the answer we found, is tawakkul. So the reason I asked the question in the first place, right? Think of two people that you love and trust and tell us why. I'm using myself as reference, but one thing is you have trust with somebody because you have spent a long time with them, you have learned who they are, you have experience with them, and you have a relationship, like an intimate relationship where you can come to a closer bond. So relying upon Allah is a definition of tawakkul, but I like this one example that someone gave, and they basically said, when you are facing any sort of difficulties where you're troubled, don't know where to turn, the first thing you should immediately do is turn to Allah for your support. But at the same time, you know, that concept of tie your camel, don't stop your efforts. It's using both of your strengths that you have been given, but at the same time knowing the source of that strength. You acknowledge that Allah is a fundamental influencer because He is the source of all strength and power. Even though the tree example that you gave is more, what would you say, inanimate objects, metaphysical, because we don't really know what's going on behind that. And we talked last week about the two types of tawheed. And we know that tawheed Iluhiyya is the unity of worship, and that's what we know as shirk, right? Whenever we think about tawheed, we only know shirk, or you believe in the oneness of God, and if there's shirk in your belief, then you're doomed for hell. But the other one that we don't talk about is the unity of lordship, or al-rububiyyah, in which you understand that Allah is in every part of your life. And that's kind of how that's what I got from what you explained, because the tree is a tree, or
it was a palm tree, but it was a pillar. It's a tree.
Has a relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. And then in the afterlife, he might be resurrected. I don't know what kind of relationship you would have, but it's reliance on God. And we talk about like the birds. My favorite story is about the bird in the morning goes out to, that goes out in the morning and then comes back and knows that it's going to get the food because Allah gives that food to them.
Yeah, I mean,
the
only way that the tree would be so concerned about being close to the Prophet would be if it understands that he's the Prophet of Allah, right? And all of nature has that understanding of Allah as their Lord in a way that we don't have.
Right. And that's even like the mountains when the Quran descended upon it. So accept us who constantly go within our mind and just forget that Allah is the source of all things. And that typically happens when we are going through a challenge. So one question, and why I asked the question of think of two people who you love and trust so much, is based off of this question that I've asked myself, or it came across for me, is that how can you love and trust someone that you don't know? And that's what tawakkul is. If you do not know Allah, how can you love Him? How can you trust Him that whenever anything bad is happening in your life, Allah is the first one you turn to? So I thought about certain ways that, I'm more method and trying things out and see how they work. So I wanted to, give y'all some solutions that you could possibly use to strengthen your love for Allah. The first one is to study the 99 names of Allah. I did try this myself. If you're alone, if you don't have a teacher, it's very hard to stay on course because it's 99 full names and it's also snippets. So it's basically scholars have gone through history, figured out the name, they've gone into depth explaining them. So one of the books that I've used is Al-Ghazali's book, but that's too complicated. So I get it up to like 5 and then I quit. The other ways that I've tried is using YouTube videos. That's been very helpful. They're back there whenever you feel like it. You read them and you get a deeper understanding of it. But again, you still need a teacher to go in depth on all of those names, related back to a hadith or to relate it back to the Quran, and give you a deeper meaning of each name. The next one you can do, and this is my favorite thing, no matter any hardship I go through, this is what I always turn to, and that is to turn back to the Quran and to engage with it often, if not daily. And I learned this from one class with Dr. Zainab Alwani, in which she made us, we did a weekend class with her, and she suggested that we read the Quran and then actually write any sort of ideas that came to us. And from that day on, which was 2 years ago, I've been reading daily or engaging with it. So the approach to take here, or why to do it actually, is because it is the only and the main source of knowing Allah. No matter who you are, you know, you hear all of these YouTube videos online where this person in the middle of the night didn't know anything, but had a copy of the Quran, English translation of the Quran, and they woke up one morning, be it in any state of sin, and they found Allah through it. And the beauty of it is that it has stories, it has parables, it has situations, it has narratives, but the biggest thing is that it's a divine book. You don't sit down with it one day and, finish it in one day. It will change your heart, and it will speak to you based on your internal conditions. So one method that I was taught was to always engage with it. So what I did was start in the beginning, and whenever you finish it, it's a circle. You keep on coming back to it. You never stop engaging with the Quran. And of course, everybody has a different level. So, some of us at a very young age, I hope for our kids on the same way, you take them to classes, and they don't have any sort of, just like we're speaking English or our native language, you don't have any challenges with reading Arabic. And other cases, English is going to be your more easier language that you rely upon. So English translations are also a source. And one of the things that I've learned is that it's not a book. So even if you read it in English, you're actually gaining something from it. And,
it's not a book.
Huh?
It's not a book, meaning?
It's not a book in the sense of like someone wrote it. It's a divine inspiration. So you can, even though you can't get 100%, if you read it
translation.
in a translation, at least you can get a percentage of it. It could be like 50%, 60%, but you will still gain some sort of value just by engaging with it.
That's a good point.
So the one I use is this one, and as you can see, over the course of a year, it has like a bunch of points that I found value in. This is my favorite translation, but the way it's broken down,
Abdullah Yusuf
Ali, but with the commentaries, because some of them they don't have that for some reason.
Yes, a lot of commentaries.
Yeah. So what I used to do, I began in the beginning and I would read a bunch of them. And actually I would have breakdowns because it was too powerful. And one big thing about that is, again, it is a divine source. If you take anything from this, it's Allah speaking to you through his words.
Eternal words.
It's eternal words. So its impact on you is a spiritual, and it's a deep connection. So now what I've done is to take it slow. And there are I think, is it hadith? Have you heard? There's this one where after Isha, or they heard somebody reciting that, and then reciting some verse of the Quran, and then they came back before Fajr prayer, and that person was still reciting the same line.
I've heard something like that,
So there is value in just a single line of the Quran.
Right.
It's not about completing it in its entirety, that you can gain value from it. And I think there's another one with Aisha radiallahu anha, where she does a similar
Right.
thing and gains value from it. So with that,
One thing I wanted to mention while you on that subject, you said earlier today, like how those ayats of the Quran have the 99 names in them
Mhm.
at very perfect moments, so you don't have to be reading Ar-Rahman, then learn Ar-Rahim, then Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, but they're sort of right where they need to be, so you kind of understand the definition by where they're used in the Quran, because it'll have an ayah that ends with
yeah,
Inna Allah Ghafurur Rahim. So now you have an idea of what does Ghafur mean, what does Rahim mean related to that.
in relationship to a story, so it
Yeah.
sticks to you more. And another thing that I mentioned last time was that the Quran was revealed over the course of 23 years, and then during that time, it was because something was happening at that time. So the Sahaba really got to know what these verses meant. But we're in a situation where we came after the Prophet ﷺ, and that, you know, we learn the Quran when we're like 6 and memorize it, and we're just in a time of information overload, and that paralyzes us. We don't know how to take that information, how to analyze it, how to use it in our day-to-day life. So this is why I use this approach, because if we don't, it's just, you need to engage with the Quran, and you need to take it little at a time. So like I was mentioning with my steps, but over the course of 2 years, what I've learned is to take just 3 lines. So I would read the English part, and then I would read the commentary to actually get some sort of depth into it. And then if it takes me a while, so I would read that in line with Arabic in line. And then for other people, again, you know, a lot of people I've noticed that I was in class and they said, we're actually scared of the Quran. Like they don't want
Both you in the
to.
frame?
Yeah.
Some people are actually scared to engage with the Quran. And I don't exactly remember as to why, but because you feel like you don't know Arabic enough, or I mean, I don't know.
Well,
what
you
other
broke
people
down,
feel
like the way you broke down, because it's so much
very
jalal,
heavy.
right?
Yeah, it's very heavy. But to continue making an effort. So if English is, you know, the one that you rely upon, know that if you get 60% of it, there's at least 40%. So go take classes. I took Kawaki for about 2 years or 2 semesters. And then if not, use your phone. So what I do is that I have an app on my phone. I play those 3 lines and I play it 2 times. So I can actually learn, and it will become more, you know, more awareness. So using it side by side and having the discipline to actually bring it together. So about 2 days ago, I did that after a long break. And there was just this one dua about the angels were making for us. And I just like, I needed that at that time, because we forget that mercy. So someone was reminding me to be merciful of myself, and then I read those lines. There's someone, or the angels that are holding the Arsh of Allah are actually making dua for you.
For the believers.
For the believers. There is a world beyond you. I think that's my favorite part of actually the Quran, because we're in this world, the outside world, or like the hereafter, just doesn't apply until you engage with the Quran, or you go to the masjid, or you go for a lecture. That's when you realize that there's a world outside of you. So first and foremost, always engage with the Quran. And then the last one is dua books. What I have here, that's like a part of my morning routine, is Word al-Latif. And I star the ones that are important to me. And it's the reason why.
So explain what Word al-Latif is.
I actually don't know. It's just a collection.
Yeah, it's a collection of awrad, a collection of dhikr that goes back to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ from, I believe, Imam Haddad from Yemen.
So yeah, that's why I wanted to explain. It's very hard. Some people, you know, like those old grandmothers, like if they can make dua for hours.
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work for me. Like, it's hard to come up with du'as when you have a problem.
Yeah.
And you might not know how to articulate how you feel. So the beauty of these dua books or these collections is that someone has thought about it and they put it together.
Exactly.
You don't have to waste the brain energy.
One interesting thing is Wird al-Latif never mentions the word Latif. That's something I always think is like, that was clearly intentional by the person who compiled the set of du'as, because the implication might be there that Allah is al-Latif, He's gentle and subtle, which is the meaning of the word Latif. So the absence of the name is itself showing the subtlety and gentleness of Allah, that it's all throughout everything else that you've read.
Everything that you read, yeah. So, but the other thing that happened to me in approaching these du'as is that it's too long. Most people spend, I went to a retreat from, what was it? From Fajr until, the beginning of Fajr until sun. I mean, it was like 2 hours.
Yeah.
I was falling asleep. I was not in a good state of mind. So
it's a good reminder to do what you can when it comes to this stuff. When it comes to like both, this is all related back to getting,
because it's not wajib. When it comes to sunnah, you have to kind of know your limits or start as something small and build your way up.
Yeah, and all of this, of course, is going back to the issue of hazan and sadness. So if you're looking for du'as to help you with connecting to Allah so that you can be relieved of your sadness, but then you put too much work on yourself and burden yourself, then you're not going to help your problem. So you have to obviously do things a little better. But that's how you're connecting, right? All this back to the hazan.
Yeah, so I wanted to read some of them, just the translation. Allah, you are my Lord, there is no God but you, upon you I rely, and you are the Lord of the glorious throne. So in these kind of du'as that is like let go and let God, realize that He's bigger than you. So if you, now we're in the age of affirmations. If you repeat something over and over again, it's positive thinking, or it's just, it puts your life into perspective. I don't know other ones, but what I have done, even though it's like 12 pages, I just start the ones that I know I'm gonna need, and I only read those, and not follow a structure, because I know I'm gonna get overwhelmed and not read this for the next like 2-3 months until I come back to it. So.
There's another one in that, I believe, where it's in another of the collections of dua from Imam Haddad, is Ya Farij al-Ham, Ya Kashif al-Gham, Ya Man li'abdihi yaghfir wa yarham. And that directly refers to, we just talked about ham, was that like you can connect some of the things that we were saying from each dua. Like whenever you have that particular emotion, you can try to find the duas that are related to that emotion. So Farij al-Ham, the one who breaks sadness, Kashif al-Gham, the one who covers despair, Ya Man li'abdihi yaghfir wa yarham. Oh, the one who is to his servant, he forgives and he is merciful, basically. So that's, really powerful ones, but all of this is providing solutions. But we all know that, like in life, the challenges that we go through are also very heavy. So that's why another thing, if I may mention something very quickly, is the last few ayahs of Surah Baqarah, because we hear those a lot recited, because they're very beautiful ayat and a very famous ayat about La yukallifullah nafsan illa wus'aha, and also later it says, Allah, Rabbana la tu'akhidna in nasina aw akhtana. So what that means is Allah doesn't burden the soul more than it can bear, and also mentioning, oh Allah, don't take us to account for that which we can't bear. So those last 3 or 4 verses of Surah Baqarah are really powerful as well. So, yes, it's also in one of those collections of dua. So a lot of times the scholars were thinking about the ayat of Quran as well to mix into these collections so that you recite them. It said low battery.
No,
I think you have to hit like close. The image is gone. Or maybe not. Maybe it's fine. Okay. But sorry for interrupting this video section. So go ahead.
That's exactly. I was on the same.
Good. We have maybe a few minutes left. Is there any questions? Any last things on this subject?
Let's see. Does anyone have any questions?
to just recite the dua itself maybe like 3 times. We should do that every time so that we can memorize it inshallah by the end.
So one question is, how does memorizing 99 names of Allah help?
So yeah, you want to go for it?
So what did I used to love, one of the names was Al-Wadud. So what memorization does, even with the Quran, is that when you memorize something, you don't need paper in order to remember it. So whenever you're in a circumstance in life where you, I don't know, feel like there's no, in that case with Al-Wadud,
The loving.
In that case, you remember that name, and then you remember the attributes, and you remember that, regardless of what's going on, Allah will always love you. So memorizing the 99 names makes sure that Allah's attributes and characteristics are in the forefront of your mind whenever you're going through challenges in life. That there's also another hadith that says if you memorize the 99 names of Allah, like there's a rank.
Yeah, there's something about that. He who commits all of the 99 names to memory, something about a reward in akhirah. But
right.
Of course, that's related to everything.
Related to this, because if you understand the characteristics and attributes of Allah, then ultimately your day-to-day life includes, you would understand Tawheed on a deeper level, the Rububiyyah, the Lordship, the oneness of Lordship, and who Allah is.
And for each situation, a different, when you look at nature, you might say, Ya Khaliq, Ya Bari, O Creator, O Evolver, or Changer. So each situation will call for different names of Allah, which you can use to sort of connect that experience back to Allah.
So concluding statements, I think something that you want to leave the audience with.
Everything I talked about, engage with the Quran daily. Like that's going to be your biggest mercy. It doesn't matter which level you're on, always engage with it. That is the fastest and easiest way to build tawakkul.
For me, it would be that ayah from the Quran again. Just remember, La tahzan, inna Allah ma'ana. Don't be sad, Allah is with us. And also, secondly, because of the way we're communicating even right now, that I heard Sheikh Ninawi say a very interesting thing in a talk I just saw on YouTube, but he said basically like, if you have a good understanding of if people of good understanding realize that distance in time and distance in space don't really matter. So when we think, oh, the Prophet ﷺ, he was in this time of this many years ago, if you really understand, the way that Allah has created the world and that he is outside of space and outside of time, then that distance doesn't matter. And if it's your people who are loved ones to you who've either passed away, or in this coronavirus situation, everyone is, not able to communicate distance-wise, that something else to remember is that, we're all with Allah. Distance like that in terms of time or distance in terms of space isn't consequential. And so hopefully we can rely on these advice, inshallah, to help us with our challenges and to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, y'all. Thank you for coming out for the second installment of Good Company with Talib and Ayantu. We will close with Wal Asr, inshallah. And this is a class 2 of 6. And so hopefully next Wednesday we'll see you for the class 3 of 6. Okay, so bismillah.
Before Surah Asr, we'll recite the dua one time to practice it. So inshallah we'll keep practicing this dua and we'll memorize it by the end of the class. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ham wal hazn wal ajz wal kasal wal jubn wal bukhl wa ghalibat wa dala' ad-dayn wa qahar ar-rijal. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.